Okay, so welcome everybody to this WFA webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you all here. We've got, I think, around about 18 or 19 companies on the line. I'm sure we'll get a few more in a second as well as the clocks have ticked past half past the hour. But thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you all here. So we're going to try and get through this in around about 45 minutes or so. We'll try and deliver up some interesting stuff, some interesting perspectives from Decideware, who are joining us today, and also we're going to present some of the results from a WFA survey that many of you will have participated in a couple of months back now, I think, and those results are going to be shared with you all very shortly as well. For now, this is a session where we're going to show some of that data and also focus a little bit on a bit of a broader perspective on business intelligence and how that's relevant for marketing procurement. So we're joined today by Stephen from Decideware, and Decideware obviously a good partner of WFA. We've done plenty of projects together. Stephen's been along to many of our sourcing forum meetings in the past, and in Europe, in the US, and also in Singapore as well. We've had Decideware, so in plenty of different places. So Decideware are good friends of ours. And it's a pleasure to have you here for this, Stephen. So, as I said, we'll try and cover this content off in about 45 minutes or so. If you do have questions, please do feel free to pose them in that Q&A box, which you should be able to access. The slides are going to be made available after this, and we'll also make this recording available as well on the WFA website. So if any of you wish to share that content afterwards with colleagues, then you can do so. And again, if you do wish to sort of follow up with Decideware afterwards, I'm sure Stephen will share his email address, but you can just drop me a note and we can make those details available to everybody after this. So without further ado, I think we should be okay with the tech side. So I'm going to pass it over to Stephen, who's going to do a much better job of introducing Decideware than I can do. So with that, Stephen, the floor's yours. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share these results and share a little bit about Decideware's perspective on that. Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Wales. I am the Chief Revenue Officer for Decideware. For those of you who don't know who Decideware is, we are a software company specializing in a platform of software tools specifically to enable and assist advertisers with managing the relationships with their advertising agencies. And I won't talk a ton about our platform other than to share that most of the data that we're going to share with you today and the results and kind of techniques are all things that can be enabled by our tools. But I want to focus in on this survey that we ran in joint with the WFA a couple months back regarding business intelligence. And I want to kind of top and tail it with some information with regards to our experience in working with major advertisers around the world. We see as we look at marketing procurement organizations, most of you on this call are most likely from marketing or work in marketing procurement, but we see the challenge that marketing procurement faces in today's fast-paced kind of marketing world, kind of on demand, always on kind of a marketing world, that there's a big challenge that marketing procurement people are facing. And that is, how do you find the top talent with the best agencies, the best talent within those agencies, the most creative work, etc. Kind of the best top talent to produce the best work. But marketing procurement professionals are asked to do that with ever-shrinking budgets. I'm sure some of you can relate to this. Prior to me being with Decideware, I was at Mars Chocolate, managing all of their creative and digital advertising agencies and ad production throughout North America. And even back then, probably almost 5 years ago, this was the challenge that I faced as well. Marketers wanted us to get the best talent, the best work, the best agencies, etc. But marketing budgets were ever shrinking, and the need to get more work, better work, etc. out of the existing budgets was even bigger challenge. So that's the challenge that marketing procurement faces. And the fact of the matter is that you are challenged from a procurement perspective with making sure that you're selecting the right agency, Do you have the right agency on the right work at the right time, on the right brand, etc.? You're responsible for scoping out that work and developing scopes of work. Maybe that's for project-based scopes or whether that's annual scopes of work, but defining all of the work and all that the agency needs to produce, managing staffing plans, costs, ensuring that they're within the bell curves, within the benchmarks of previous costs, etc., and understanding that total spend. You're also responsible, and some of you are responsible, or at least involved in the briefing process, realizing that the briefing process is highly affected, or is a big portion that affects agency churn and the amount of rounds of rework that's available or that's required on a given piece of business. And so understanding that process and how to reduce the amount of churn and reduce the amount of rework by providing better quality briefs to our agencies. You get involved in production spend and budgeting of and managing production and total spend with regards to total cost of ownership of a given piece of creative. And then you also get involved at some level in evaluating the performance of the agency in terms of the relationship and how their creative is and how their strategic thinking is, etc. There are lots more elements that you get involved in as well, but you work within the entire agency life cycle. And as a result of that, there's a lot of information that you collect, a lot of data that you gather that is a challenge, and keeping it all straight is a challenge, especially with global organizations. And being able to potentially apply business intelligence to all of this data that you collect is extremely important. We're seeing in the marketing world business intelligence being utilized for programmatic marketing, for targeted marketing within consumer-based marketing, etc. And they're using, the marketing side is heavily using business intelligence to understand where to place where to place media in market, how to market to consumers directly, etc. And so why not take those same kinds of business intelligence techniques and apply them to marketing procurement data so that you can make better decisions about your agency spend, about your agency relationships further upstream in the process. And so that's what we set out to understand, is how does the marketing procurement world currently use business intelligence data around the world? And so we partnered with the WFA to run this survey a couple of months ago. And one of the big questions that we asked up front was, what's your geographical remit? So we wanted to understand who the companies were that were responding to this survey and kind of what they represented in terms of geography responsibility that they had. And 56% of the respondents have responsibility for global organizations. They're managing spend globally, 24% in the EU, 11% in North America, 9% in Asia Pac. So you can kind of see that these are large global organizations that participated in this survey, managing large global spends. We then asked one of the big important questions with regards to business intelligence is, how important is understanding and managing data, specifically around marketing procurement data? And the responses were very interesting. About 90% of the respondents indicated that understanding and managing marketing procurement data was critical to directly inform decision-making, or it was essential to support the decision-making process within marketing procurement. When you look at this, with 90% being either critical or essential, those are big, important words. And that means that we need to obviously take notice as to what this kind of business intelligence or managing marketing procurement data is, and how do we make it more beneficial. So another question that we asked during the survey was, how do you describe the business intelligence practice in your marketing procurement environment? So on the one side, 90% of the respondents indicated that it was critical or essential to have a good business intelligence or to make use of their marketing procurement data. So we wanted to understand what the current state of things were, and that's why we asked this question with regards to how would you describe your business intelligence practice in your marketing procurement environment. And what's interesting here is that less than 25% indicated that it was a mature environment within their organization, which means 75% indicated it was immature or informal, or they weren't doing it at all. So we all agree that managing marketing procurement data and having business intelligence principles applied to that data so that we can make better business decisions about our marketing procurement spend and our agency relationships is critical or essential, but very few of us are actually doing it or doing it well. And some of the verbatim comments that were made about that last question with regards to describing their current environment were things like this. The team works closer with marketing, meaning the business intelligence team works closer with marketing around programmatic, around targeted marketing, and less around marketing procurement data. Typically it's silo driven, though some of the big core data is centralized. Not all of it, but some of it is centralized. Interesting comment here, we have a global analytics team supporting procurement across various categories. So not necessarily specific to marketing procurement, but an analytics team looking at all procurement. As in most companies, it's developing, and there are many things to improve on. Data quality, easily accessible analytics tools are some key concerns. And we have BI for directs and commodities, which implies that you don't necessarily have it, or that particular respondent didn't have it in marketing procurement. And two of the big key areas that I saw in these verbatim comments as we were analyzing them is that the key environment or the key elements to a good marketing procurement business intelligence or business analytics kind of environment is, one, the data does need to be centralized. And this is key. Not just the big core data, but all of the data needs to be centralized. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And in addition, the data quality needs to be there, and it needs to be easily accessible. Getting to the data, making business decisions out of the data needs to be easily accessible. So a couple of key highlights in these comments that I wanted to point out. We of course asked the question, is there a desire for better management? Obviously they indicated that this was essential or critical. Less than 25% of the respondents are actually in a mature business intelligence kind of data analytics environment. So, is there a desire for better data management? And while this is a little bit of an eye chart, I won't go through all of these data points, but I do want to point out a couple of highlights that stuck out. One is the very first one. We could make better sourcing or commercial decisions if we had access to more robust data. And almost 90% of the respondents agreed to that statement. Again, correlating back to the fact that this is critical or essential to making business decisions. We'd like to have more robust data management programs in place. Again, almost 80%, which correlates back to, or makes logical sense, correlating back to the fact that only about 25% have a mature system in place at the moment. And then around 70% indicated that it was important to have this data available in real time, and that they wanted to improve their data management and the interpretation capabilities of that data in the near future. So there's lots of interest in this space, but very few companies have a very mature model in this area. And it seems to be a very new function in terms of applying business intelligence to marketing procurement data. But many companies with global reach are interested in knowing more about and growing within their organizations. And of course, we wanted to understand what areas of the business, what type of data did they want to be able to understand? In which areas would you like to have more data in order to make better business decisions or to meet or exceed business objectives? And of course, unsurprising to many of us, many of you, is that 90% of the respondents wanted more data around agency fees, scopes of work, spend, all of the nuances that go into a statement of work or around agency fees, especially with global organizations. They also wanted to understand agency performance and KPIs, and understand where their production money is going, and understand where their media dollars are going. And so clearly there's an interest in understanding all of the different areas of the agency lifecycle relationship. So the question is this: if in fact large companies or any advertiser feels that marketing procurement analytics data, being able to understand the data within marketing procurement, is essential or critical to making agency decisions, business decisions that affect agency relationships, that affect marketing budgets, how do we get from point A to point B? How do we get and increase the fact that only 25% of the respondents have a mature data analytics, business intelligence facility or function within marketing procurement. How do we get from that to increase that percentage? Well, one of the most simplistic ways to look at this is the fact that you, as marketing procurement professionals, do have a gold mine of data at your fingertips. It may not be in a standardized format. It may not be in a central database. It may not be in an easy to understand visual format at the moment. But you do have a ton of data at your fingertips. In fact, probably more data than what you think you do. One of the things that we've learned as we've worked with global organizations around the world in implementing tools to help them manage their agencies is that they do collect a lot of information, and a lot of times in large global organizations it's just not in a standard format that can be easily analyzed. But you do track a ton of data points within your organization. Think about your individual organizations. You currently are tracking a lot of measurement information. You are tracking how much things cost. You're tracking how much of the budget we're going to spend on a given deliverable, how much of the budget we're going to spend across various categories of deliverables, etc. You do track count information. You do track the number of agency resources working on a piece of business, or the number of agencies working on a given brand around the world. You do track that information. Again, it might not be in an easily identifiable, easily analyzed format, but you are collecting it. You're collecting sequential data, ranking information around agency performance based on an evaluation scale that you might be running, whether it's a SurveyMonkey-esque kind of spreadsheet evaluation or a full-fledged agency performance process like what we offer. You're tracking that kind of information, and you can rate and rank agency performance. You can rank agency spend, etc. You are tracking category information. What's the split in channels with a given agency? Are they working just on digital, or are they working on digital and television and print? Are they doing just creative and you've outsourced or decoupled production? You have that kind of category type data. You have ratio data at your fingertips. The percentage of budget that's being allocated to digital versus television versus print. You have the percentage of resources that are senior resources working on your business versus junior resources. You have the percentage or ratios available to you on how many resources are in creative versus account management versus strategic thinking at the agency, etc. So you have that kind of information. You also have rate information, whether it's blended hourly rates, whether it's average hourly rates per resource, whether it's a bell curve of hourly rates for creative directors versus copywriters versus account directors, but you have rate information at your fingertips. And these are just 6 kind of key areas around spend, but you have other data points as well around performance evaluations and around briefing process, around production spend, all those kinds of things. And so you do collect a lot of information. The key is, how do we get it into a format? How do we structure it in such a way that you can actually make business decisions out of that data? Well, one way to do it is to draw a picture. Old Chinese proverb says, one picture is worth 10,000 words. And one of the things that as we have developed our business intelligence offering within Decideware, we've done some study on how humans learn and how we understand information. And over 50% of our cognitive ability, our ability to understand the world around us, is focused through our eyes. It comes in by the things that we see. And this cognitive ability has been developed over thousands and thousands of years. The fact of the matter is that the way we see things it directly interprets or directly affects the way we act or react to the world around us. For instance, thousands of years ago, we needed to understand that this cat was not very dangerous. It was cute and cuddly and could sit on our laps and purr and make us feel good at the end of a long day. However, this cat could make us feel really bad. This cat, very dangerous. We also needed to understand relative distances, relative sizes, how one animal or one environment affected another. For instance, this cat on the right, if it was 2 miles or 2 kilometers away from us, that's not very dangerous and we're not too concerned about that. However, if it's 2 meters or 2 yards away from us, we're very concerned about that. We needed to understand relative perspective from one element to the other. And one of the things about data is that we don't see humans, us humans, some of you are spreadsheet lovers. You love spreadsheets. You live via spreadsheets. I know some of those people. They're interesting to be around. But most of us don't work with spreadsheets well. We don't see numbers well. It doesn't come natural to us as humans. I'm going to use an illustration. I'm going to give you a quick quiz to kind of point this out. I'm going to show you a data set in just a second, a series of numbers and data across the screen. And I'd like you to quickly try to identify the number of threes. How many threes are there in the data set that you're about to see? Because I want to point out the fact that we as humans don't see numbers easily. When we're looking at a static list of numbers across a spreadsheet, a two-dimensional spreadsheet, we don't see numbers well. Here we go. Everyone ready? We're gonna show you this data set. See how many threes there are in the data set. Some of you are thinking 5, 6, 7. But if I present the data in a different way and visualize the data a little bit differently, you can quickly see that there are 6 threes. And it's very easy to find the data, the pieces of information that you need inside of the data set to make logical sense of the data that you're looking at. I'm going to do one more example because I think this also illustrates the fact that as we look at analytics or analyzing our marketing procurement data, these big data sets that we have, we can see that there are patterns that can develop as well. I'm going to show you another data set, and what I'd like you to, and there's going to be a pattern in the data that's fairly easy to pick out. I'd like you to visually or mentally think about where the next one is going to appear. Where will the next one lie in this data set? Now, if you look at this data set, clearly there's a pattern developing, and clearly the next one is going to appear right here in the third row down. You see, as we visualize data, as we look at these numbers, we compile the numbers together and we look at them in a visual way, we can quickly point out or find patterns. We might uncover information in our data about resource mix on a given scope of work or about the performance of an agency that we didn't know before because we were just looking at static numbers in a spreadsheet. So the question becomes, if we're going to compile this data, everyone has indicated that this data, marketing procurement data, and having better access to it is essential or critical to making business decisions. So the question is, if we're going to compile this data, who are the main stakeholders that receive reports or outputs driven from the marketing procurement data that you have? And these results were very shocking to me. And I'm going to explain why in just a moment. So who are the key stakeholders that receive data that you're collecting in terms of marketing procurement? If we look up here at the top left-hand corner of this chart, we can see that about 60% of the recipients of marketing procurement data is marketing procurement. Right? Marketing procurement, your colleagues, or agency operations, agency management. Let's lump those two kind of together. Over 60%, or about 60%, of the respondents indicated that those two groups were the primary stakeholders for this data. Now, what's interesting about this and what surprised me the most is most of you on the phone, I am assuming, are in procurement within your organizations. And what's interesting is that in most procurement organizations, you as procurement professionals don't own a budget. You don't have a budget, most of you, to purchase tools to improve your marketing procurement relationships. You don't typically aren't managing your own budgets. You're managing other people's budgets. In fact, you're managing these 3 people's budgets. You're managing, sorry about that. You're managing these 3 people's budgets. The CMO, the CPO, the CFO, you're managing their budgets. And what's interesting is that these people here are very infrequently getting the data, the reports, the outputs that you're generating. So the question becomes, why aren't these people more involved in helping you analyze the data, helping you make decisions based on the data? And one of the primary reasons that we see as to why these 3 people, or these 3 groups of people, are not the primary recipients, they should be, because it's their budgets that you're managing. they should be involved in those decision processes around budgets. They can affect your ability to spend money on marketing procurement tools, to invest in tools to help you manage their budgets better. But they don't currently, because we're not showing them the data. Why aren't we showing them the data? Well, most of the time it's because it's not in a format that's visually appealing to them. CMOs, most of them are probably not interested in looking at a series of spreadsheets and looking at a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper. However, they are interested in looking at something that's visually appealing where they can make quick, easy decisions on. And that's why with most business intelligence, to be able to take a large quantity of data, big data sets, and break them down into easily digestible, action-oriented visuals are critical. And that's why with business intelligence, it's important to develop good quality visual dashboards that give marketing procurement folks, your CMOs, your CPOs, CFOs, the ability to make business decisions based on that data. Why? Well, because they're highly visual in nature. It's not a series of spreadsheets with thousands of rows and cells in them. They're quick, easy to understand, easy to digest visuals. They're designed by professional business analysts. Most of you, and when I was working in marketing procurement, I was not a business analyst. I could understand the agency-client relationship. I could understand kind of where our money was going from a standardization perspective, but to bring in a professional business analyst to be able to understand and interpret the data and make sense out of it's important. You want to also make sure that it's dynamically filtered and supports natural hierarchies so you can easily drill down into the data in a logical format and roll the data up. You want smart sorting and benchmarking, being able to understand when you get a proposal from an agency on a TV commercial or a banner ad, to be able to understand where that fits in the benchmark and how do we sort that to understand, are we getting good value for money? To understand the benchmarks or benchmark curves for seniority mix on a given piece of business. If we're just doing adaptation type work, do we have too many senior resources working on our business? And how do we find that quickly so that we can make better business decisions? We want to be able to represent advanced statistical patterns. Like I showed you that very simplistic pattern a few moments ago. Being able to understand very advanced patterns in a quick, easy way. Visual dashboards can do that. You can look at different views of the same data. We've worked with clients where we've developed a similar dashboard for two different clients, and each client looked at the data very differently. It's the same dashboard, same type of visuals, but they looked at it differently. They were pulling out different information from that data. And you also want to be able to group sets of related data points together, make logical connections within those. And when you present data visually, it becomes very appealing to a CMO, very appealing to a CFO to be able to make proper business decisions. So where do you start? We obviously know that this is critical, essential to proper business decisions or to improving business decisions, but where do we start? Well, the key here is standardization across your organizations. With almost 60% of the respondents of the WFA survey having a global responsibility, it's critically important that your data be standardized globally. And I'm going to show you only a couple of examples of this. We're talking about standardizing resource mix globally, understanding job functions and roles, and coming up with standard definitions or standard descriptions for resources and roles around your organization so that all of your agencies are using the same type of resource definitions. Same principle with deliverables. Being able to standardize deliverables. What does a banner ad or a low complexity banner ad mean to your organization versus a high complexity banner ad? What is a creative execution? What is a landing page, and how does that define a standard landing page so that all of your agencies are working from the same sheet of music? You also want to standardize complexity. You want to understand, is this new or highly creative tactic? Does this require lots of strategic thinking? Or is this low adaptation kind of work? We're just doing language adaptation. Why do we have 13 high-level strategic executives working on this business? And so understanding complexity and being able to standardize that across your organization makes data analytics that much easier. You also want to standardize the product stage or life cycle. Some of you work, for instance, in a pharma company. There are launch or new brands coming on all the time. versus maybe a CPG that there's a brand that's been on the market for a long time and we're doing a lot of awareness work, those kinds of things. Those are very different brand life cycle stages, and it's very important that very important to understand the stages of in terms of standardizing those stages so that you can do proper business analytics on that. And so it's important that we standardize this data in order to make good use of it. And what's interesting is that about a year and a half ago, we did another survey with the WFA where we talked about standardization with regards to the scope of work process. And we asked the respondents, does your company have a standard company-wide method for executing scopes of work? Because it's critical to good data is the capture of that data. In order to analyze the data properly, we've got to capture it in a standardized way. The respondents were about 60% indicated that they do not have a standard scope process. And in fact, when we asked about a central database or location where the current or historical scope of work data is stored, because in order for you to have proper data analytics, there needs to be proper data capture, and that capture needs to be in a central database. And what's interesting is that 70% or almost 70% of the companies we surveyed a year ago indicated that they do not have a central location for storing this data, which means it's not standardized, which makes it even more difficult to run analytics against that. So it's important that standardization is the key, standardization of the data collection process is the key to good data analytics with regards to being able to really understand where your marketing procurement data is going. So when we collect all this data from a standardized perspective, then what do we analyze and how do we analyze it? Well, it's critical that we analyze things like, these are just some examples of things that can be analyzed and what our clients have been analyzing and literally saving millions of dollars in the process, is understanding product life cycle. Do we have the right mix of people on the business for the product life cycle that we have? Or do we have the right agency spend? Are we spending too much money with agencies that are underperforming? And being able to correlate those kinds of data points together. Do we have the right resource mix on this piece of business? Maybe the piece of business that we're producing, the statement of work that we've approved with this agency, maybe there's a lot of low-level work, but there seems to be a lot of high-level people working on the business. Or vice versa. It seems to be very strategic work we're doing, but we only have one executive level person at the agency working on the business. There seems to be something out of line. And so being able to understand that and being able to analyze that is critical. It's also important that you understand deliverables. Do we have, are we producing too many, are we producing low-level work and we're costing it at high levels? Is the complexity of the work correlated to the spend, to the resource mix, to the average hourly rate of those people working on the business? And how does agency performance fit into the mix? It's interesting that, sometimes you might have an agency that's performing extremely well. They've only got one piece of business, so we look to increase their capacity. We give them more business because they're knocking it out of the park on the one brand that they're working on. But what we see is that as you start to give them more business, they can't handle more business or potentially can't handle more business. So being able to look at the correlation of performance to spend, performance to agency mix is critically important. So those are a few things that you can analyze, but again, highly recommend a business analyst come in and help you understand the data and understand what to analyze and the way to look at it. So I want to jump for just a moment and show you a sample of what a dashboard might look like that you could be using to analyze your marketing procurement data. And this is an example of just a scope of work dashboard that kind of breaks down data in a visual way and allows you to drill down into it. For instance, if we look at this data, this dashboard that's currently up on the screen, you can see that we've got a breakdown of fees in this fictitious data set where you've got three brands. You've got the Buffo brand, you've got the Clean Air brand, and you've got the iMen brand. You can quickly see visually based on just the fact that the size and shapes of these different elements on the screen, that we're spending way more money on the Buffo brand than we are on Clean Air, and the IMEN brand is even less. We can also see that there's more money being spent in the US versus Japan versus China versus Australia versus Canada versus France. You can also see the relative sizes. Again, by simply putting relative sizes of shapes on the screen, you can quickly and easily see where your money is going. And the ability to take any one of these areas and quickly drill down into it to quickly see the scopes that are underneath it is critical. So if I click on Buffo here in Japan, we can instantly see the scope of work that's down here at the bottom. We instantly drill down into that to see where that spend is going. And so you can easily understand where your data is going. You can also look at things like rates of, in terms of hourly rates on a given scope. This chart here is showing all of your scopes of work down the left-hand side. Your total hourly rate, your average hourly rate for that scope happens to be at $213 an hour. And if you look here, your average is sitting here just under 200. This dotted line represents the average across all scopes. So you can start drilling down to understand what scopes are below that average and what scopes are above that average to quickly point out where you've got high-end hourly rates versus the average, and be able to quickly understand that. You also can drill down into any one of these scopes of work and understand the total fees, the number of FTEs, total hours, average hourly rates, or any kind of data that you're looking at. And one of the beauties of visualization of data like this is that you can totally configure it or customize it for your specific needs. And so the question becomes then, where to start? Where do you begin with regards to this kind of a process? Critical and essential, but how do we get there? Well, first thing is endorsement. It's critically important that if you're going to develop a business intelligence type of a support system within your organization, that you need to have endorsement from the highest levels of the organization. Your VP levels, your CMO levels need to buy in on the fact that this type of data is critically important, and it can dramatically impact on your business decisions, literally to the tunes of millions of dollars. It's also critical, like as I said before, that you standardize the data collection process to make the analytics valuable. The data's got to be worth something. You need to communicate. You need to communicate not just to your procurement colleagues, but as I said earlier, you need to communicate to your CMO, to your CPO, to your CFOs, and really be able to understand what's going on inside of the data and communicate that out to the key stakeholders. There needs to be accuracy to the data. Highly recommend bringing in business intelligence or business analytics experts to help you understand the data and ensure that it's statistically correct, so that when you're looking at a dashboard of rates or a dashboard of agency spend to performance, you can know that that data is accurate, so that when you're making business decisions on it, they're proper business decisions. And continuous improvement. The data changes regularly, especially in today's fast-paced marketing world, where you are, with digital being what it is, and every time we turn around, there's a new media channel that your companies are spending money on. How do we continue to improve the analytics, continue to improve what we looked at, and what was important today might not be what is important with regards to business decisions 6 months from now or 6 years from now. So it's important that we continue to improve on the business intelligence offering that we have. And we've recently published, Decideware has recently published an ebook all about business intelligence that we highly recommend that you go ahead and download. You can go to our website. The URL is here in the deck, and we can provide that to Steve as well at the conclusion of this webinar, so that he can send that out. But that's a free download. Just register your name on the download page there, and you can download that free ebook to give you more information. Kind of scratch the surface a little bit on business intelligence here in this webinar, but as just kind of in conclusion, clearly it's critical for large advertisers or any advertiser to have this kind of data at their fingertips. You currently have it. It's just a matter of bringing it together into a format that works for you and that you can make proper business decisions on. I'm going to stop there. I appreciate the time. I think, Steve, we're about right in terms of time,
Yeah, spot on.
and turn it back to you.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Stephen. That's really interesting stuff. So yeah, a few questions which have been sent to me, and then I'm sure there'll be others that will be added into the Q&A box as we go. But let me start off with a few of those, and maybe we can just take sort of 5 or 10 minutes just to get through some of these. But Stephen, I've got one question which two people have asked, but they've asked it in different ways. So apologies if this is badly worded, but I'm just trying to get my head around exactly the sort of the what they're trying to get at. But essentially, it's a question around the different types of visualizations that we could see from this type of business intelligence, because I think that the focus has to be very much on what is this telling us, which is actually insightful, that we can't sort of skim over an Excel document and get a sense of anyway. So I think part of it is that. Part of it is the future of what this might look like. And so have you guys thought about, and have you sort of seen ways in which this could actually be linked to the agency performance metrics? So getting a sense for how not just about how much you're necessarily sort of investing in terms of funds or resources, but also around sort of how you might link that to the agency performance metrics and how well campaigns have done, how well those scopes have performed, how they've affected, bottom line sales, if that's kind of a hard metric you might have, or indeed how well that agency has actually delivered against that particular scope, through the sort of the typical agency service level metrics that you might use. Have you looked at those components and those elements as well? And do you think that might be somewhere where which might be brought on in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make sure that I'm clear. The business intelligence dashboards that we offer, the service that we offer, literally it's a blank screen, and we create the visualizations exactly the way the client wants them. That could be a map that they click on a given region in the map, and it gives them the spend and category information, agency information in that particular region of the world. It could be graphs or charts similar to what I showed, kind of a brief example of them. And it allows you to, the biggest key to developing visual dashboards is understanding what is the question that you're trying to answer. What is the question that you want to understand out of the data? And we build the dashboard in a visual way to give you that answer in the most logical format. The most logical and the logical extension of all of this is taking your marketing procurement data and, Steve, to your point, tying it into the agency performance, sales data, etc. What if you could create a dashboard that gave you something like the following? It gave you the agency fees for a given TV commercial. It gave you the production costs for that commercial, so you could understand, and all the breakdowns of those two costs, so you could understand end to end what your total cost of ownership of that asset is. But then it pulled in third-party data into the same dashboard from your media agency with regards to total spend of media dollars of that asset. So how many times did that commercial run? What did it cost us to run it, etc. And then pulled in visual dashboard data around the eyeballs that saw that commercial. How many eyeballs saw it? When did they see it? What was the frequency? What was the reach, etc. And pulled that in. And then overlay on top of the same dashboard the sales figures of that brand prior to that commercial running, and 6 months, 3 months, whatever target you want to look at after that commercial ran, to understand, did we truly get a brand lift? Did we get a sales lift? Did we get a market share increase in some way, or a brand awareness number increase? So yes, the beauty of the way in which our business intelligence offering works is that you can tie in the internal Decideware / marketing procurement data, as well as link that together with your media performance data, sales figures, etc., to get a holistic view of your marketing environment, which is extremely compelling to a CMO, CFO type of a person to really understand the end-to-end. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it also sort of partly answers the next question as well. It was that good an answer, Stephen. You've answered the question I was about to ask you, but I'll kind of pose it anyway. And you alluded to it before when you mentioned around around finding the innate kind of question that you'd like a dashboard to answer. But it's a question a bit more about sort of like about the sort of the value perception, and it's sort of around how you actually drive usage of these dashboards, because there's a lot of dashboards around, there's a lot of visualization tools around, and it's adding another one or another set of that into the mix, even if it is kind of corralling and herding and shepherding some of that data into something which is more holistic, as you just described, is obviously, it's a tough sell internally. And so what are the sort of, what do you think some of the ways are? What are the hooks that sort of procurement people can use to actually do that? Is it around, as you sort of suggested, trying to find the ways to demonstrate that there's more value to this than just sort of helping you pinpoint spend inefficiency? Is one way in doing that around sort of focusing on the value piece and saying, well, this is an agency that's being immensely productive that we haven't been able to sort of identify before. We should be sort of championing the work that we're doing with this particular agency, and we should sort of see if we can give them more business, for example. Does it sort of work along those lines, do you think?
Yeah, it does. And I think the biggest key there, Steve, is to understand what is the question that the CMO needs answered. Because the CMO, or pick any person, I suppose, but using the CMO as an example, the CMO, to your point, potentially is on dashboard overload, right? Especially a CMO. They're looking at programmatic data and they're looking at marketing analytics data in terms of the performance of media and consumer buying habits, etc. They're looking at all kinds of dashboards. So from a marketing procurement perspective, what is the one question that a CMO needs answered that would be beneficial to them in terms of agency consolidation, in terms of agency efficiencies, in terms of, if there's a CMO out there that, is publicly announced that they want to cut, $500 million in agency fees, or they're, reducing their agency roster by X in the hopes of reducing fees, or they're going to decouple production because they want to achieve, a 200 million dollar, or whatever the number is, reduction in fees, or efficiencies within the agency, better performance of the agency, etc. What is the one question that CMO needs to answer? Because one of the beauties of business intelligence type technologies like what we offer is that the ability to configure a specific dashboard for each specific use. So a CMO wants to answer a different question than a marketing procurement professional who's working with 30 different agencies across 15 brands in 10 regions of the world. The marketing procurement person might need to see 5 or 6 different dashboards that answer different questions around agency consolidation, spend, performance, etc. Because they're charged with saving money. They're charged with finding efficiencies within the organization. A CMO is trying to understand the big picture. And so the biggest key to this is understanding the single question so that you don't get burnout, but so that you're providing relative information to the CMO, to the CFO, to the procurement person in real time as it's needed.
This is a simple question, maybe the answer is complicated, but what have you seen as being the most popular sort of visualization within the dashboard? Because obviously there's plenty of different, as you alluded to there, sort of different configurations it could take. You could look at evaluations with versus remuneration, and you could look at scope of work data with evaluations or whatever. What's sort of been the most used, the most sort of popular visualization type, or sort of correlation of two different sort of data sets that you've seen people doing, just to perhaps give some of the people on the webinar a sense for what they could be doing sort of internally, manually, perhaps?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones is the correlation between hourly rate and seniority of the folks working on the business. In other words, or complexity of work versus seniority of people working on the business.
And that sort of brings us to a close, I think. If you guys do have any further questions that you'd like to ask, do feel free to email me or email Stephen directly, and we can get those answered. I'd just like to draw your attention to, before we sort of close off today, draw your attention to the next Sourcing Forum meeting, which is happening in Nestle. or is being hosted by Nestle, I should say. It's happening in Switzerland on the 10th of September. So we hope to see many of you guys present at that meeting. The slides today from again to you all, and there'll also be this recording online, and you can access that via our knowledge base, the knowledge library, where WFA members can access all the data, all the research, all the surveys, all the benchmarks that we create. So all of those will be available in that library. And if you don't have a password for that, please do get in touch with me, and I can make sure that you get a login and username sent to you. So I think all that remains for me to say is thank you very much to Stephen and to the whole Decideware team. Thanks very much for sharing. It's been a pleasure to be with you this morning in the US, and please do keep in touch, and we'll be delivering another WFA webinar very, very soon. Thanks very much.